witches have a responsibility within their communities for collective care, but they also have a political role. In that role, they are resisting tyranny in all forms, using means both tangible and magical. So they are organizing, they are healers, they are midwives and doulas and death midwives and medicine people, herbalists, etc. But they also are advocates. They're healer advocates. They are protectors of the commons, and they take that role very seriously.
You're listening to Make Some Noise Podcast, episode number 475 with guest Carmen Spagnola. Welcome to Make Some Noise Podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hey, everybody. Well, that was excited and high pitched, wasn't it? Hey, everybody. That was my radio voice. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the podcast that is a little bit more professional. I am so glad that you're here. Per usual, I'm super glad that you're here. I have been head down in search of a tattoo artist. Has anyone ever been through that journey? I have 2 tattoos. They're both words, and one's on my foot. Hurt like a bitch. Hurt so bad. And one on my arm. And the one on my arm I got in 2016 and just never finished it. It was supposed to be bigger than it was, and I ended up chickening out with the design. And that tattoo artist was fantastic. She's all the way in Charlotte, which is like a 2-hour drive for me. So I've been looking for one that's within a 30, 45 minute vicinity of me. Oh my gosh. It is like, I feel like it's like finding a life partner. Looking at their art and do I like their style? Oh, anyway, I didn't realize it was going to be such a chore to find this person. If you're thinking about messaging me with your person, thank you. As long as they're within, Greensboro, Triad area, or I'll go to Charlotte or Raleigh, Durham. Maybe I'd rather not go that far. But anyway, that's what's been preoccupying my time for the last couple of weeks. And then to find out like the good ones, they're booked for months in advance, which is understandable. It's very understandable. I guess people are catching up on their tattoos since we were all shut down for the pandemic. I don't know. Maybe this is a regular thing that happens, but I get all excited and I'm like narrowing it down. I have about 3 people and I go to look at their little link and they're like, we're booking for January. And I'm looking at this in the beginning of September. So anyway, that's what I've been doing lately. How have you been? I'm really excited to introduce you to today's guest. I have been following her work for what feels like an eternity. I'm just so drawn to it. And we're talking about self-care, but really her episode could go in so many of the themes. And let me tell you a little bit about her. Carmen Spagnola is a Cordon Bleu-trained chef turned trauma recovery practitioner, clinical hypnotherapist, and kitchen witch. She is the author of The Spirited Kitchen, Recipes and Rituals for the Wheel of the Year. She's the host of the Numinous Podcast and founder of the Numinous Network, an online learning and support portal for people healing from trauma through a cross-pollination of somatics, attachment theory, and nature-based spirituality. So without further ado, everyone, here is Carmen. Carmen, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's an honor.
I am so excited to talk to you. Before we started recording, I was telling you how long I've been following your work. And then I saw that you had written a book and I was like, I'm going to send her an invitation. And here we go.
It's so exciting.
I've told my audience that, this was years ago that I was interested in witchcraft and was really kind of trying to find my way. And luckily this was before it got really popular and kind of, it took over social media. Mm-hmm. But I will admit that I do think that I was in a better place mentally. And this was long before COVID, when I was doing these rituals and things like that. And I'm ready to get back in it. And I'm excited because now I have your book, and I love how simple a lot of these rituals are. Like, you don't need to have like 17 different ingredients and like, get a crow's feather from a specific age of a crow.
You don't have to memorize lines and lines of
in another language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. But I have a lot of questions. So I want to jump in right away. And actually, I'm going to start with reading from an excerpt from your book. It's the title of it is A Word on Witchcraft. And it's so good. I wish I could read the whole thing, but time and probably copyright. So I'm going to keep it short. And it's towards the end. And you say, if resisting oppression, reclaiming my body as my own, praying to my ancestor tree, fighting for collective liberation, and organizing around a culture of care and dignity for all makes me a witch, my friend, I am that. And then the very last sentence, you say, and let's not allow anyone to shame us, our identities, our bodies, or our cultures ever again. And that comes after kind of a short history of not just witchcraft, but kind of the damification, if you will, of witchcraft. So can you expand on that a little bit in your own words?
For sure. Yeah. Actually, even hearing you read that back to me, I kind of well up with a bit of emotion. I feel that sort of fighting spirit rise up in me. Like, yeah, that's right. And I sort of hear what you're saying, or behind what you're saying about how popular it is on Instagram. I actually think that what we currently are calling witchcraft is going to deepen over the next decade to what it is underneath, which I believe we would just call animism. So all witches are animists, even though not all animists would call themselves witches.
That was one of my questions. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so animism has two parts for me. Putting it really simply, the first part is that we would call it the ensoulment of the world is a core part of our spirituality. So ensoulment, meaning that everything has its own soul, humans, animals, rocks, plants, etc. The second part of it is that we live in a participatory universe. So as much as I'm aware of my dog, she's aware of me. As much as I'm aware of the carrot that I've just pulled from the garden, it is aware that, and it may not be consciousness, quote unquote, but it's an awareness. Science tells us that plants are reacting to the humans that they live with in homes and things like that. And so an animist proceeds as though this is a participatory universe with everything as aware of us as we are of it, and seeking us in the same way we are seeking the greater than human. So that, I think, is where the current kind of adolescence of this phase of collective consciousness around witchcraft is going. I think it's going to mature into that. When I think about what a witch really is, if I were to encapsulate that essay, A Word on Witchcraft, I would say, witches, of course, have a responsibility within their communities for collective care, but they also have a political role. And in that role, they are resisting tyranny in all forms, using means both tangible and magical. So they are organizing, they are healers, they are midwives and doulas and death midwives and, medicine people, herbalists, etc. But they also are advocates. They're healer advocates. They are protectors of the commons, and they take that role very seriously. So they're not just getting together to do magic for personal gain or edification. They're doing it for collective well-being. So I take that particular piece as my awakening into my own identity as a witch. I read Sylvia Federici's Caliban and the Witch and was like, I can really embrace not just feminism, but feminist witch, and take that on as an identity, and proudly so.
When was that book published? I know you talk about that talk about reading her book.
Published, was it like 2009 or something?
Oh, okay, so not that long ago. I thought it was like
it's not like 25 years or anything. No, it's a classic though, right? I think it seems like even more of a classic because I will say it the book that probably took me the longest to ever get through. It's not a very thick book, but if you're familiar with Richard Tarnas's work, if your listeners know Cosmos and Psyche, which is like a really big, thick book on psychological astrology. It's like one of those classics of the where you're like, whoa, yeah, that was like a big book and took a long time to get through. Whereas Caliban and the Witch is like a fraction of the size, but it took me way longer because it's so dense. And every page, you're just like, oh, fuck. That's what the witch wound, that's how it's showing up in me. Oh, that's patriarchy again. Oh, that's white supremacy culture. Oh, I see what a witch really is now, and who has been persecuted because they are liberatory figures of their time.
Okay. That reminds me of Women Who Run with the Wolves. I felt like every paragraph could have been a thesis. And that's
absolutely. And one that you should go back and read again, because you'll understand it better 5-10 years later. It's actually been at least 5 or 6 years since I've read Women Who Run with the Wolves. And I remember getting it, God, like maybe in the early 2000s or something like that. When I looking back, I think I was probably a little young for it. Like the themes really appealed to me, but like, did I take it in?
Yeah.
Maybe subconsciously.
Maybe on the surface level.
Yeah. Or like it's in there and I was drawn, but it didn't click for me. By the time I read Caliban and the Witch and I was around 40 or so, it really clicked.
Yeah. Okay, well, now I'm going to have to put that one on my list too.
Yeah, for sure. And find a book club or a support group, because honestly, every other page, you're like, God damn it. You're like so mad about patriarchy. Fuck. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Make sure you have a couples therapist if you're in partnership, because you're just like going to notice how patriarchy shows up in like parenting, partnering, institutions, education. Like you're just like, God damn it. And so
it's like the air we breathe. We just don't even notice it.
Water in which we swim. Totally. And so, yeah, it's like maybe you need therapy, and also like the people around you need to be able to like connect and support each other while you like go through rage. But it's very validating to connect the dots, right? It's like looking up at the night sky and you see all these stars. And then that feeling when you see the Big Dipper, and you're like, connection. Like I can locate myself. It's familiar. I understand. I see a pattern in all this vastness. That's what it's like when you read a book like Caliban and the Witch. It's like, Big Dipper.
We'll put that one in the show notes too.
Nice.
On that same topic, can you talk a little more about folk magic and how it is incorporated and kind of quote unquote woven into everyday life?
Yeah. Well, folk magic, you can almost, when you think of folk magic, in contrast to that, you can think of high magic. So when we think of high magic, we're talking about ceremonial magic. We're talking about, rites, rites, where it's like, this is, here's how we cast a circle. This is, we're going to do, whatever. There's, it's the Golden Dawn. It's these secret societies. It's mystery schools, that kind of stuff, where you get initiated into a hierarchy, really, of, initiate to adept. You go through different practices and you demonstrate that you have knowledge and skill. High magic is great. It has its own place, but folk magic is what we regular folks do.
Okay.
Like don't have a formal coven. And, we're just kind of muddling through. Hey, maybe you're lucky and you had an auntie or a grandma or an uncle who was like into this kind of stuff. That's great if you have somebody who's passed it down through families, but most of us are kind of looking around. Maybe you've come into the world like myself. I've always had a highly developed spiritual yearning, but nobody else around me really matched
so now
that.
We have the internet.
Now we have the internet. When I was, growing up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was like we had books on lucid dreaming and crystal shops and things like that. So you kind of find your way. Yeah. Tarot cards, exactly. You take some courses, you get some books. So folk magic is the magic of your tools, like a cauldron. What is a cauldron but a pot on a stove? What is a chalice but a very special vessel for liquids that are important to you? What is an athame but just a knife? So all of these tools that we associate with high magic as these like talismanic properties, if we look around, most people in like every culture of the world, they related to the more than human forces through their everyday tools, baskets, ovens, those kinds of things. So folk magic is about what the spiritual significance of your sacred grains of your ancestors were. What were the foods that sustained them through good times and bad? What were the foods of their celebratory times? Why did they have the crafts that they had? One of my favorite things is wheat weaving, and when you dig into the history of why did they have corn mothers and why did they make all these beautiful things out of wheat? Well, it's because they believed the spirit of the grain as they were harvesting would move through the field, jumping from stalk to stalk until finally the very last stalks of wheat would be harvested, and they were thought to contain the essence, the spiritual sustenance, and all the good fortune for the future harvest in those last stalks. So of course, if they're going to save the best seed, or they're going to save seed that's going to be what they plant next year, they would weave it into these beautiful ornaments, and they would turn them into sort of grain mothers that they would hang almost like an angel on top of a tree. You would have this grain mother of the kayak, the old woman of winter, holding the hopes and the most treasured items of your community, which is seed. Yeah. Of course, they're making these ornamentations and beautiful rituals to it. So folk magic is born of need. It comes from a time and a place and a people. And it's usually something that is an embellishment or an honoring or an offering to the greater than human forces that are saying thank you for blessing us with good health and good fortune. Or if there's been misfortune, it's an offering to say, ooh, we're tracking that you are unhappy, greater forces. Can we, petition to you by making this special bread or this cake, or, making an offering on this particular lunation or this month?
Interesting. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN, in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC.
Okay, so would it also be considered, I'm trying to think of people's everyday lives and thinking about my life. So I have a rosary that was my great grandmother's on my father's side. And it's hanging in my office. Mm-hmm. And I also have a plate that was glued back together. It must have been dropped and was broken. That was my mother's mother. And she died 12 years before I was even born. I never got to meet her. And my mom was like, why do you want this plate? It's broken and been glued back together. And I'm like, I don't have anything of hers. Like there's one photograph of her. So I like to have it. The way I look at it is it's not just like an item. Like I look at it as having this in my home where I'm raising my own children, where I'm taking care of my family as my grandmothers did before me. It's a way to honor them, even though I never met these women. Mm-hmm. So is that kind of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. When we're talking about folk magic, we are humans of all cultures assign significance and meaning. We're meaning making animals, right? We love it. Exactly. And so the layer that we're adding with magic is perhaps we can influence this meaning that we're making. Perhaps we can use it to benefit us or protect our family or keep us healthy or stay in good contact with our angelic ancestors who might be helping us. So the magic is that you believe that you are still in relationship somehow with this ancestor through this artifact. And of course you are. And of course that carries a certain kind of charge and a certain kind of meaning, which is slightly different from pictures of them or stories about them. Magical objects are one of the ways that it's, I think, the most easy and accessible way to bring alive the magic of every day and food. And then, of course, times of year and celebrations and things like that. But yeah, it's the spiritual significance we assign where the magic comes from.
Okay. Just want to make sure I was doing it right.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's what's so great about folk magic. There is no wrong way to do it. And as Sophie Macklin, who's a colleague and teacher of mine, she was the first reader of my book. She says, like, there is no pristine prior tradition. So if you're thinking, what was the magic of my lineage, and you don't know, maybe because no one ever told you in your family, or you were immigrants, or you were adopted or something like that. It really doesn't matter. The thing that makes it folk is that it's like of the people and of the land, and it emerges from that time and place. So there isn't some pristine prior tradition where it's like, oh yes, I had a witch in my lineage. It's like, well, everybody's like a little bit, Some people grow massive vegetables. Other people can sing really beautifully. Some people can, are great at bird calling and bird language. Like, these are all different forms that folk magic, if you were to add the layer of recognizing the participatory nature of the universe, now it's just gone from like a tradition to magic.
Maybe that's why I'm so good at growing plants.
For sure. Yes.
It's so funny because I used to not be good. And I used to say I had a black thumb. And then I realized the trick, and people laugh so hard when they come to my house and they ask me, I've actually cut down and given a lot away because it's just so much work. They've asked me, like, how do you do it? And I said, you just have to give a shit. Like, you have to. And luckily we have the internet, and you can find out like what the best soil is for this kind of plant, and what kind of light and how much water. And I have plants. I have a fiddle fig that is so big, and people are like, oh my God, they're such divas. They're so hard to grow. And I'm like, I cannot get it to stop growing. It's gigantic. Same with a ZZ plant. I had to split it in two, and it's just, maybe there's something to this. Like,
it is. It's attunement. That's so much of what magic is about, right? It's attunement, and having a relationship with the greater than human is like a courtship, right? So you are courting the divine through your plants, just attuning, paying attention, sort of like, how would I woo them? How would I give them what they need? And like, how good does it feel to see them thriving? Right. Yep. So you're in this reciprocal relationship with the other than human. It's not just extractive. It isn't just cast this spell or grow this thing for prosperity and abundance. That can be part of it for sure. But that only flows from your reciprocal relationship with the other than human, and that you have courted them, and you're like, how could I charm them? How could I show them that I love them? How could I delight them?
I use my intuition to water them as well.
Perfect. Yeah.
I know that sounds
totally not. Oh my gosh.
Obvious.
I use my pendulum to decide where I'm going to put plants in my garden.
Oh, wow.
100%.
Okay,
oh yeah. 100%.
I see that as very woo-woo, but like using my intuition to know when to water a plant. And again, sometimes it's obvious. Like, you can tell by the way the leaves look, but sometimes I'll walk by it and I'll just be like, this one needs to be watered, and I don't even have to stick my finger in it or anything.
Yeah,
I just
you're
know.
in relationship. That's so sweet.
I never looked at it that way, but thank you. What is a wilderness quest guide?
Oh, great question. So I trained 2 different kinds of training. So one was I went out on a quest, which is where you go out into nature as minimally as possible. So I went out with a tarp, a sleeping bag, and some water and just fasted for 4 days. And that was with a guide. Yeah, I did that in Death Valley. I've done that a couple of times. And then like here in BC, where I'm from, I've gone several times. And so then eventually I was like, I got the message of like, you should be taking people out to do their fast. And so I apprenticed with my quest guide who had taken us out. And he was, teaching to a certain degree, like how to keep people safe, fasting in the solo in the wilderness for 4 days. That was certainly part of it. But mostly it was about the spiritual initiation of leaving your known reality and going out fairly naked and embedding yourself in nature. And I think that's a really important developmental task for those of us who like growing up in the Western world in the modern day. I think any kind of healing really requires this developmental piece. Like if you can't go out into nature and embed yourself and learn how to feel safe and part of the ecosystem, the family of things, as Mary Oliver put it, I think any other kind of healing is happening on a bit of a shaky foundation. The second kind of training I then did, though, is I wanted to be able to lead quests in my home bioregion of British Columbia, which has actually many different bioregions, but I grew up as like a sea and mountain kind of person. And so then I went out to the mountains to a guide outfitter who leads hunting trips and nature photography trips and all those kinds of things. And one of the things they offered was training to become an outback guide on pack horses. And so that was interesting because it was not spiritual at all. And I was trying to explain to them what I was doing. And the guy was like, well, what do you mean spiritual laws? The law of nature is life or death. And I was like, well,
do you know how to like de-hoof a horse? Like,
well, that was day one, actually. Within half an hour, we were
I don't even know if that's a thing.
Shoeing a horse. Shoeing a horse.
Okay, thank you.
And learning how to, pack them and ride them for 8 hours, 9 hours, and then cook meals for the guests and that kind of stuff. So I had these like 2 kind of very different trainings and I integrated them into one. But of course, the piece that was missing for me, because a lot of the way that quests have been relayed in Western culture is through the idea of the monomyth. And like, hey, I love Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey, very transformative and influential for me as an adolescent. But as you mature, you're like, hey, what about the cis white heroic male kind of people? Like, that's not. So the piece that was really missing for me was community and witnessing. And kind of recognizing like nobody can go out on a fucking hero's quest without somebody holding it down at home or somebody
without
like
some resources and support.
Yeah, without support. So the way that I do it is like people have we spend a year together. And so, yes, people go out for like 12 days and it's 4 days of teaching, 4 days of solo on the mountain, 4 days of incorporation when you get back. But then we continue for a year. And the question every season is, so how is your quest unfolding now? And help people go back. Because it's, the biggest challenge when you have a spiritually transformative experience, a numinous experience in your life, is going back to the world changed when nothing and no one else has changed. And the feeling of alienation that can come up. Like, how do you hold the vision that you received? How do you hold the spiritual maturation that you did when other people are not enjoying that you have had this?
We call that reentry.
Reentry. That's exactly what it is. We just call it the return. And it's like, that's really challenging. And so you do need to have a community that can remember your story, hold your vision for you when you forget, because you come off those experiences having this very profound sense of remembering the radiance of who you really are and what you're meant to contribute. And
it sounds like a spiritual experience.
It's 100% a spiritual experience. Even the folks who have come they have been a little more like I'm going to go out and conquer nature. I'm going to prove that I can survive.
That sounds very American.
There's, that's kind of like an archetype that shows up, and we dispel that pretty quickly, that this is very much about becoming your ecosystemic self, the ecological self, the self that's woven into all things and is in relationship with all things. And so you don't just go and then like leave and take off. It's like, nope, now we're going to keep co-regulating. We're going to keep, witnessing each other and stay in relationship so that we can support change at a communal level. The quest isn't for you. The quest is for your people. And so if you go back home and you're changed and they're not acknowledging it, you need support to help bring your quest to your people if they're not receiving it.
Do you run these anymore?
Yeah, actually, I didn't for COVID. I had to cancel one, but the next one is going to be spring 2023. And very soon I'll be putting up an application process. But ideally, people would have gotten some of the teachings already. I have them we've been doing them during COVID online in my Numinous Network.
Okay.
So there's like a whole course that you could take to learn all about. We work through
like introductory.
Yeah, we work through human development through the 4 seasons model. So it's like you would learn about what's the spiritual developmental task for summer, fall, winter, spring, and then it'll be more like a refresher when you go out. So hopefully there'll be 6 to 8 people who will come and go on quest with me on the horses. They take us up to a beautiful spot in the Caribou Chilcotin.
And I haven't been to BC since I was 9, but I do remember being just stunned at how beautiful it was, even at such a young age.
Oh,
it's pretty out there.
And the way the kind of route that you have to take, because there's like quite a lot of driving. Like we really help you, we connect you with your cohort so you can get up there, because you're driving out to the middle of it's 45 minutes. The last little bit of it is like 45 minutes down a dirt road. So it takes a while to get there. And you go through like 5 different, you go from like maritime, like the sea, to the desert grasslands, to the alpine glaciers, like it's, all in like one
to the
10-hour trip. Exactly. That's exactly what it's like in one day. It's very cool.
It sounds a little bit, but this is on a much smaller scale and different. My friend Nicole, she actually was on my podcast and she talked about it. She does those ultra marathons or like the 100-mile races, like out in the wilderness. But when she talks about them, she can like almost talk anyone into like doing one with her. Like she talks about it like it's a spiritual experience and like the things that you go through to get through it. And she never looks at it like as she wants to win. For her, it's the experience of doing it and being with nature and really being with your body. And it just is incredible. And she loses a toenail like every time she does one.
Yeah. I mean,
all part of the
initiations are like that, right? And every rite of passage is a sacred and spiritual experience, even if that's not someone's language, but they all are about sort of the miracle and wonder of humans going through, like playing out our human drama. It's really, it's so poignant, and I love poignance myself. So like, I can see where she's coming from, that it's like absolutely exhilarating, even though it's also the most challenging thing you've ever done. And that kind of pain beauty, it's just like, oh my God, I'm going through the hardest thing. Why did I do this to myself? And like, you can feel sorry for yourself. And then all of a sudden you have this like absolutely sacred encounter with like a fly or something that like comes to you at the right
on
moment.
The trail. Like that's who she talks about, is like these people who just like, she talks about them like they saved her life, like they're just these strangers that volunteer, 48 hours of their time.
For sure. I'm sure it restores your faith, in humanity. And that's what we're all trying to do. Like, having encounters with the numinous, if we can like go to the autonomic nervous system for a second, when we think about like the vagus nerve and our social engagement nervous system, experiences of awe have this very interesting effect on our nervous system that's different from love, that's different from friendship. When we experience awe, it triggers our social engagement nervous system, and the sense of being enfolded into something greater than ourselves. And that stimulates pro-social behavior. In other words, it's like, oh my gosh, the universe is so big and miraculous, and I'm so small, and I want to collaborate with it. And I don't expect anything in return, which is different than, say, love or friendship. Most relationships have a reciprocity challenge where it's like, oh, I'm willing to give and give and give to a certain point, and then I want to receive back. But when we experience awe, when we experience encounters with the sacred, we feel enveloped and enfolded, and we want to collaborate, and we don't expect to get what we want. That's not what it's about. It's like we feel belonging in that participatory universe. So that is exactly what Quest brings out. It's like, it's a feeling like no other. It's so much more than personal accomplishment. It's the experience over and over again of transcendence, when you're like, oh my God, the sun, oh my God, this tree, oh my God, those birds.
The dew on the ground in the morning.
Exactly.
Yeah, when it's
absolutely
been so hot.
exhilarating.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so fascinating. I could listen to you talk about that all day. Okay. I want to slightly shift gears, and let's talk about intuition for a moment, and how can the people listening develop their intuition from what you call a trauma-informed attachment perspective. I'm assuming you didn't come up with that term, but just I know that that's very important in the work that you do.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things so when we talk about trauma-informed, what's really important there is we recognize we have choice, we have agency, we have voice. So we're never pushing through signs of distress. So if there was ever a situation, let's say, this just came up in the network. Somebody was asking a question at one of my AMAs, may ask me anything things, the Numinous tutorial. She was like, I had a really scary experience with tarot. What would be your suggestion for, like, should I get back into it since it seems like such a foundational skill, or, how could I get over this bad experience I had? And I was like, thinking, the thing is, from a trauma-informed perspective, why do you need to? You don't have to get over it. There is like nothing so fundamental in your spiritual or intuitive development that you should be pushing through that signal within you that's like, I'm actually not tracking safeness right now. I'm feeling a lot of stress. That's like absolutely unnecessary. So any kind of modality where you feel like you have to know it, or you are, not up to snuff, is that's bunk. So from a trauma-informed perspective, we are learning how to land a sense of safeness in our bodies. And the thing about the attachment orientation and the somatic orientation with intuition is that whatever your attachment style is in your human relationships, it's going to show up in your relationship with spirit. Maybe not necessarily the same. What we know about attachment styles is they're not fixed, right? They can change over time, and it really depends on the relationship and the power and rank and privilege and all of that. But generally, we'll all have a bit of a set point, maybe a bit more anxious or a bit more avoidant.
Fast forward to the end of 2024 and think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If you want to learn a new language, you absolutely should get Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Now it's so easy to speak simple conversation phrases with the guy that takes care of my lawn without having to consult language apps. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/noise. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/noise, spelled BABBEL.com/noise. Rules and restrictions may apply. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com.
I'm going to stop you for a second because I'm pretty sure my audience knows that. And I've had a couple of therapists on who've talked about attachment styles, but just like quick rundown, the attachment styles are anxious attachment, avoidant attachment. Isn't there secure and then combination?
Yeah, exactly. The combination would be called disorganized, where you're running both a bit anxious and a bit avoidant kind of at the same time. That's exactly right. And please so each of those have a particular somatic or like body-based experience. To be more avoidant, your nervous system is shaped in a certain kind of way. And if you're anxious, it's shaped a bit differently. And that shows up in your relationship with spirit. So when I'm working with intuition, I'm asking people to first start close in where it's very easy. So we start with allies in the unseen that we would call competent protectors. And so those can be ancestors. But if you're like, yeah, no, I come from a long line of abusers, like, great, we don't work with that then. We look for who can you work with in the spirit realm who would be both very strong and competent, but also very nurturing and protective. And so a lot of people, if they're like, I've never had that experience in my life, I don't know what it feels like to be able to rest in safeness and well-being, then I'm like, great, let's work with these rocks. Let's work with this plant medicine. Let's work with these animals. We just keep going until we can find like, what is the safe sphere? And then we start from there. There's no dogma here. So that's what I bring into how I help people develop their intuition is first we go, where's your safest realm? And what things naturally are you drawn to? And we work with that. And everybody has a different type. Some people are more clairaudient, like myself. Intuition comes to me, through like words and hearing and music and literature and books and things like that. Some people are more claircognizant. They just kind of know. So maybe they work with oracle cards and they only look at them for half a second and then they don't have to look at the book. They know exactly what's coming through. Maybe some people are more clairvoyant and they love working with oracle decks and they love huge spreads and that kind of stuff. So we're working with like what is within the zone of comfort and competence and self-efficacy for your nervous system. And what are the tools and the pathways that would make you feel more confident to explore.
I love that so much, Carmen. Like, I think that's one of the favorite things I have heard in a long time. My favorite things I've heard in a long time because, and I wrote about, I write about intuition. I think I've written it, at least touched on it in all three of my books. But in my last book, I talked about how it can be challenging for many women, especially because it gets conditioned out of us, and especially people who come from, challenging childhoods where maybe nobody talked about anything. And I mean, that was the case for me. I can speak from my own personal experience. And it wasn't abusive when I was a child, but nobody talked about anything difficult. So like when a very close family friend took her own life and I saw my parents crying about it, but it was like tight-lipped. Nobody talked about it. So I was walking around like, okay, I know something happened. It was pretty obvious, but like no one's going to talk about it. So it's like those small things that can happen to us over time. We sort of, the way I describe it is like we kind of from a cerebral level think we're just constantly questioning ourselves and our own gut feelings and instincts. And so I love that you start from such a like a primitive level. That sounds necessary.
Well, and of course, capitalist, imperialist, white supremacist, patriarchy is constantly conditioning us to push through our own signs of distress and trying to obscure our preferences, trying to make us think that our preferences are actually what they want us to do, right? That's what advertising is. That's what so much, it's like high pressure tactics everywhere you look. Conform, stay in this box, be this role, this identity. And so any inner voice you might have that's like, I don't know if that's for me, we get conditioned to push through that in order to either succeed or to at least to survive. Capitalism is doing it to us constantly. So when I'm teaching folks, whether we're actually looking at intuition or whether we're looking at working with the autonomic nervous system, if you have an immune disorder or long COVID, or if you have developmental stuff from childhood, we're constantly helping people attune to their own preferences. That's one of the ways we unhook from that conditioning, is to be like, what do I actually want here? And actually that can take a long time to remember, it really can. It takes some practice.
I'm sure it's not just, like I can answer that right away.
Yeah, totally. Even in exercise, like we do this simple exercise of like pushing away just your arms in the air and just like repeating, I can say no to what I want to say no to. Sometimes that brings up a ton of emotion for people.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the opposite one. Like I can feel chills a little bit thinking of people who are like, whoa, slowing it down and pushing away and just saying that to myself it's such an empowering moment. For others, it's the scooping in and embracing gesture and saying, I can say yes to what I want to say yes to, and having their hands land on their heart. What if it's, I want to say yes to me? Those things create a somatic chain of events in which you start to see greater possibility. And when you can see that greater possibility for yourself, spirit will come through and give you little nudges and be like, yes, 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 you're doing it. Oh my gosh. Your ancestors are like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy for you.
I've had that.
I'm so proud of you.
Before.
Right. And then if you can tolerate be receiving that kind of love and just stay with it, even if it's just for a minute or two, you can have a neuroplastic event around that and recruit that feeling as a resource later. And like, that's one of the definitions of magic, right? Being able to change consciousness at will. So if you can be in a different consciousness for a couple minutes and have your brain actually shift and shape onto that, that's pretty magical.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I thought of something when you said that, because in my experience, when I was practicing and intentionally making space and time for, folk magic or whatever you want to call it, I got afraid of how fast it was happening. And I had a mentor tell me, and she was very gentle about it. And she said, my hunch is that you are afraid of your own power. And I said, and I think you are right, because it was happening so fast and it was so big. And it was obviously bigger than me. And being someone who struggles with control, it's like, I can't control this and it scares me.
Oh,
so
for sure.
I pulled way back.
The numinous is, right? The numinous tremendum et fascinans, right? Things that are like awe-inspiring and sacred also have a very similar somatic imprint as things that are terrifying. So in somatics, we'd say like rapid embodiment is actually not helpful. It needs to be, the trauma-informed piece is like, don't try to swallow the sun, right? It's like you go, okay, whoa, thanks. That's actually a little bit more than my physical body can handle right now. And so then we have that agency to be like, hey, thanks spirit, or thanks guides. Can we just slow it down? Like you've got it at 11. Can you turn it down to a 4 and see if I can just get used to it? And so that's the agency that we bring in so that we're in that reciprocal relationship. And you don't get afraid that you're going to be swallowed up or like something too big is going to happen. We want it to happen at the pace that your human body can integrate.
Okay. Yeah. I felt like a tsunami a bit. Well, I have so many, not so many, but like a handful more that I want to ask you, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And the book is called The Spirit and Kitchen: Recipes and Rituals for the Wheel of the Year. And I just have one more question that hopefully isn't like a big whopper. What was your favorite part about writing the book?
To be honest, I think my favorite part about writing this book was the collaboration I had with my photographer, my dear friend, Stephanie Ray Hull. I'd never worked that creatively with another person before,
Really?
where we did like 30 photo shoots in 12 months. And we were both learning how to do this. Like we were like, how do we, like foods.
And it was the recipes, right?
The recipes, there's all those things. And
it seems easy, but I've heard it's really not.
No, it really, oh my gosh, it's so much planning and coordination. It just like took over my life for a long time. The thing is, I had the book in my head. I'd been doing Wheel of the Year workshops for a couple of years. So I had the recipes. I knew exactly how this was going to come together. I'm a huge fan of Martha Stewart since like way back in the 90s. So I was like, Martha Stewart, entertaining from like 1987, that book, like I knew exactly how I wanted my book to be, but the execution of it, was super challenging. Fortunately, I had this collaborator whose style and taste and eye and attention to detail and faith in me was just unwavering and so steady. And there's this like really great quote from Ira Glass where he talks about, as a creator, there's this period where your skill is not as awesome as your taste. Mm-hmm. So it's like, this is my first time making a cookbook. And so I needed to just kind of recognize, like, I just got to make work. I got to do the first one, and it's not going to be as good as I would want it to be. It's not going to meet my vision, but I got to get the work out. And Ira Glass was like, you just got to keep producing more work and get enough practice until one day your skill matches your ambition, and that killer taste finally matches your.
Doesn't he say like you have to just keep creating crap?
Just got to keep creating. Yeah, just like I don't know if he says crap, but he's like you're not going to like it, that. But you still have that killer taste, and so you got to keep creating. And so I think from a personal perspective, the best part of it was from like this character building perspective is like letting go of perfectionism, not letting great be the enemy of good or whatever it is. And just
stop comparing yourself to Martha Stewart.
Yeah, exactly. I just got to get the first one out there, and hopefully like the third one is going to be as good as I want it to be. So like character building, that was probably the best part for me in the long run, but in the short term, it was definitely collaborating with a kindred spirit.
It's beautiful. Like it truly is. And the link is in the show notes. Again, it's The Spirited Kitchen, Recipes and Rituals for the Wheel of the Year. Yes, I said it right. But is there anything else that you wanted to say that we missed that you wanted to circle back to before we complete?
The book is available on October 31st. And of course, I want to
Was that on purpose?
You know what? No, that was the original. The original date was a couple of weeks prior. And it was like actually a better date astrologically for me. Because of course I plan all this stuff out. In sort of the just supply chain issues and all of that, it got pushed back. And I think October 31st is like the second best perfect day for it to come out. But really, I just want to see what people make and do. I am such a looky-loo when it comes to other people's altars and other people's kitchens and things like that. So I hope if people get the book and they try anything, or they just really like it, they'll tag me on Instagram, because it really is like it's the thrill of my lifetime to have created this.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And all of those links will be in the show notes, everyone. I have followed Carmen on Instagram for probably 7 years now. And I think you all absolutely should. Thank you for your time, Carmen, and everyone listening. You know how grateful I am for your time that you choose to spend it with my guests and myself. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms Podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.